Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt, that fine gentleman, as always, right over there. The one, the only, still the incomparable, the beautiful, the 40-year-old Dan Rubenstein. Sir, welcome. Welcome back. How are you?
At time of recording, I'm holding on to the last gasps of my 30s. People are looking at me mid to late 30s. Is that Dan? And like, well, you're not wrong. So, yeah, I guess depending on when you're listening to this, I'm either 39 or 40, and I feel great, Ty. I feel good about it as I expand in age. Here we go, Ty. Big 12 expanding.
There you go.
In roster of teams.
A little clunky, but I get what you're going for.
You got to get to the runway. You got to get to the jet bridge. You got to get people their baggage claim, and I feel like I got them there.
Welcome back to the show. Hopefully you had a chance to go back and listen to the Pac-12 preview that we did last episode. But if you're just stopping by for the first time, hello, how are you? I'm Ty. He's Dan. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe, whatever you can hit on your podcasting app of choice. If you want to get in on our special exclusive preseason game, we call it Grand Total. You pick the over-under win totals on every FBS team. We've got them all there. A nice little form. The winner gets
Is it FBS or Power
Five?
5? Be clear about this.
Power 5.
Okay.
What did I say?
Power 5. You said FBS again. You're in your own head. It's each over-under win total for Power 5.
Power 5,
programs.
yes. Power 5.
And
Grand
Notre Dame?
total.
And Notre Dame?
And Notre Dame, yes.
Okay.
Grand Total is the name of the game. Verballers.com is where you can sign up for that and also get access to all of our bonus Patreon features. And listen, it's the reason for the season. We're doing previews. We're starting to talk about what is ahead in 2023. If you like this show, do us a solid. Tell a friend. Tell a friend. Follow on social media. Follow on YouTube. Send links out to all your people. Spread the word of the verbal.
And
we're
if
a
you
big
don't like
tent.
the
We
show,
are welcoming all folks.
If you don't like the show, tell an enemy. Screw them. Still helps us. But that's a good way to think about it, I think. I'm great with it.
Here is the format once more that we are following.
My goodness. How interesting. How bizarre.
If you want to go deep and get the minutia on every team's position groups, go buy a magazine. If you want to get the interesting things, the points of intrigue, the points of fascination going into the college football season. Of course, we're going to cover some of that minutia, but we are here today to talk about the bizarre, the interesting, the fascinating points as we go through the Big 12 in 2023. Last episode, we came up with 23 magnificent points of intrigue for the Pac-12. We will keep track as we go through today with this. I may not play it every time. It does get a little long in the tooth after a while, but I will be keeping track on my homemade tally sheet here of all of the interesting points that we bring forward relative to the Big 12, Dan. What are the overall fascinating things for you, just from a conference level in the Big 12? We'll go team by team, but overall, big picture, 30,000-foot view. I'm using all the corporate cliches. What are the fascinating things for you in this conference this year?
There's either no power or no obvious power, which makes even big picture looking at the schedule. We did the Pac-12 episode, and we are pretty certain because of returning quarterbacks, returning coaches, returning players overall that were impactful last year in the Pac-12 that were like, oh, it's a tough stretch to play Washington, Utah, Oregon straight, something like that. USC and Washington consecutively, something like that, where it's just like they return so much and there's just a lot of continuity of strong teams there. In the Big 12, there will be strong teams, but because of the flaws of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, TCU, whoever, I'm not sure we have a handle. I'll speak for myself. I'm not sure I have a handle on what a rough stretch entails in the Big 12, which I think, big picture, makes the conference more entertaining and more enjoyable to me, because that will develop once the season begins, as it will in every conference. But I think it's especially pronounced in the Big 12, where after week 5, you're like, oh, damn, they have a rejuvenated Oklahoma, an unbeaten Texas, and a surprise Baylor team consecutively. Things just got way trickier the back half of the season. which is something to celebrate, I think, within the conference.
Your point of fascination is also my point of fascination.
Overlap.
And I'm going to go a step further with it. I broke the Big 12 into 5 tiers, TIERS. At the top, I've got Texas and Oklahoma. I think it's a 2-horse race to win the conference. Okay. I'm inclined to pick Texas. I don't want to jinx it, but Texas has a lot to be excited about. We can get into them momentarily. Then I've got the non-tenders, which isn't a word, and I consider tenders with tie or just tenders as a whole. I don't know.
Right.
But whatever that rung is below the contenders, I've got K-State and TCU.
Okay.
Beneath that, I've got the sleeper tier, which I've carved out as Texas Tech, Kansas, and UCF. Below that, I've got the Baylor tier, which is really just Baylor. Maybe we could put Oklahoma State in the Baylor tier, but that construction would be a little odd.
Okay.
And then I've got 6 teams at the bottom. You can come up with a name that suits you, but I've got Oklahoma State, Baylor, Iowa State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Houston. That actually might be 7 teams. I don't know. I'm a podcaster. I'm not a mathematician.
The Blurg 12? Is that good for you? Blurg.
Yeah. I mean, It's the bottom half of the conference. Yeah. And I know what to expect. There are some points of intrigue there that we'll get into, of course, but that's how I break it down. Okay. And I think it kind of goes along with what you're saying. It's tough to suss out where these teams fall in the pecking order. The other thing here, not to be outdone, the conference is 4 new members. Perhaps we're burying the lead by not talking about that straight away. But BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. Depends how optimistic you want to be, I think, about UCF. But the other 3 have some work to do as they jump now into a Power 5 conference. I took Cincinnati and UCF. I can talk at length about them. I know you've got BYU and Houston, and you could do the same on that front. But it's always interesting whenever we have this influx of new schools and new fan bases into a Power 5 conferences. Brett Yormark has made no bones about the fact that he is actively seeking more expansion, happy where he's at right now. But if rumors are to be believed with respect to all things Pac-12 and media rights there, he's a guy who's hungry to add more teams. So maybe this is something we'll see more of in the future for the Big 12. And this is an interesting precursor, to say the least.
Brett Yormark going to try to buy Greenland, right? He's in the mix. You always got to look in different time zones. Brett Yormark has landed in Reykjavik, which is Iceland. On that topic, by the way, I don't know if these are today big name programs, given how they're constituted and given how we project them, I suppose, this year. But these are big name head coaches who have all recently, been considered to be excellent in other conferences, in the same conference, in I guess in BYU's case, no conference, but between what BYU and Kalani Sitake did a couple years ago, Zach Wilson, what Gus Malzahn did in the positive and getting to a couple national championships, one as a coordinator, one as a head coach, and the offensive firepower he helped to produce there. Dana Holgorsen in this conference with a number of incredibly special, specifically offensive seasons. And then Scott Satterfield, if you go back to his time at least at App State, that at one point he was a pretty major figure in the sport, given App State's reputation for giant killers and just year-to-year excellence. That, again, I have no idea if the Cincinnati program's in a healthy place. It doesn't seem as healthy as it used to be, just a year or two ago. But I think there is a good amount of name recognition and power with the new additions, which I think is obviously a positive thing. Yeah, and great fan bases too. Let's be real about it. These are programs that have not been at the Power 5 level. Obviously, they are deserving of this spot now that they've got it with the Big 12. But, BYU's got its own radio station. Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, these are programs that have been building for a while. Every college has its own radio station.
Just saying. Not on Sirius XM,
no,
baby.
I think, you're right. But no, they have their TV network too. I love that. The big thing too is these are 4 teams that no other conference wanted to add. So there's that too.
Let's add that one. Point number 3. Why not? Yeah. Why not? Where do we want to start? Which team to you really stirs the Dan Rubenstein drink?
You know what? I believe in respecting excellence. I believe in respecting accomplishment. I think we start with Kansas State, the defending champs.
Defending champs. The champ is here. The champ is here. K-State won the Big 12 last year.
They did.
9-3 regular season, won the Big 12 championship, lost the bowl game to Alabama. They entered this season in a really interesting place. Their over-under is 8.5, which if you have decided that you want to embark on this journey with us and play grand total, I think 8.5 is an interesting number for K-State. This is the part of the show, and we're starting early, where I wax poetic and probably jinx some poor team before the season.
That's okay.
Even starts. Because I love K-State. I love what they stand for. If you want to go full truffle pig here, Dan, I will allow you to do so in Manhattan, right. Kansas.
Start digging with that knowledge snout for valuable information truffles, Ty.
Because you know what? They have fully weaponized the art of finding diamonds in the rough.
Sure.
It is what Chris Kleiman is all about. He is building the whole plane out of building more with less. I love it. It's not going to work every year. This year, maybe we could talk about this year, but there is a stability in that formula at K-State that frankly does not exist almost anywhere else in the Big 12. They are confident in what they've got. They've locked him up long-term, and I think they feel pretty good about where this program is headed. Even looking back last year, of course, won the conference. There wasn't a whole lot wrong with this team, but it took a while to get there. They didn't know at first that Will Howard was going to be the guy and not Adrian Martinez. Took them a while to kind of grow into that. The defense, too, the defense, for as much as we talk about fundamentals with Chris Kleiman teams and how he nurtures that, the defense wasn't a particularly great tackling team. They didn't do much behind the line of scrimmage. These are areas that they're hopefully going to improve upon. I'll get to that in a second with the K-State defense. If we are talking, though, in terms of most fascinating things, for me, it's something I'm calling the Trans-Climerian Orchestra.
Oh, I love this.
Which is clunky construction.
No, I'm good with it.
But I came up with it at 5 a.m. today, so give me a little bit of slack here.
It's great.
Kansas State has pretty much its entire offense back, with two notable exceptions.
Yeah.
Deuce Vaughn and Malik Knowles. They're two most explosive players, one a running back, one a wide receiver. I give them a lot of credit. K-State a lot of credit in that they were very targeted in the portal, and they went out and they landed, I think, guys that can hopefully be plug and play to some extent. Treshaun Ward, the running back from Florida State, comes over. He was much sought after this portal season. And also Keegan Johnson, the wide receiver from Iowa. Can K-State plug these guys in and keep the offense humming? I don't know, right? That's going to be the question of this offense. Will Howard looked really solid down the stretch. If he has that complement of those two guys, I think that would be a huge boon for this offense, and they could maybe pick up where they left off. I don't think it's exactly plug and play, certainly not at running back, because Deuce Vaughn was a workhorse, and Chris Kleiman has talked about how he wants to pair, Treshaun Ward, with DJ Giddens, more of a running back by committee approach. DJ Giddens, by the way, had a really good freshman campaign last year. If they're going to run the same system, they have to find some share, some sort of, a
rotation,
rotation that will make up that lost production. And I think Keegan Johnson probably slides in as the number one wide out wide, but he's not Malik Knowles. He's not as big, and he's also not as accomplished. This is a kid who showed a lot of promise, like over 20 yards a carry in his freshman year when he was at Iowa, but was hurt last year. And, it remains to be seen whether or not he can step in and give them that same pop. I understand completely why they would go after him. I just don't know if they're going to get that level of production. There are other guys, other pass catchers that I think are in a good spot here, and it's not just on Keegan Johnson. But for me, the point of fascination is whether or not what they did in the portal, going out, getting those two impact transfers on offense, can keep the offense humming to, 2022 standards.
So I think the line is mostly or all back or something with Kansas State in front of Will Howard.
Yeah.
And so the question then to me, because I think they lose a lot on defense.
Mm-hmm. And I'm getting to that, I promise.
I know you are. So my question to you is, because you've gone deeper into this, is this a Kansas State team that is going to rely on offensive, I was going to say firepower, but they had it last year. I just thought they were pretty balanced last year. Like, are they going to have to win differently this year? Because when you don't recruit like Texas or Oklahoma, not that Texas has won the conference a bunch, but when a school like TCU or Kansas State or Oklahoma State or Baylor, because they're not recruiting deeply enough to win a conference multiple years in a row and go through a string of 10-win seasons, it seems that Kansas State probably had a bunch of junior and senior star power last year between, King Felix on the defensive line and Deuce Vaughn. And so that kind of stuff is harder to find. You can develop it over time, but if Kansas State doesn't have that depth, the sure thing seems to be a sturdy offensive line protecting Will Howard. And if Will Howard's a full-on stud, then, yeah, they can win a bunch of games 35-31. The question is there no other way to win at this point for Kansas State?
And you bring up a really good point. I'm going to dig it again.
Yeah.
That's 4 and counting, or 5 and counting. I'll have to go back and check the tapes. But, I was thinking about that a little bit as well, because Kansas State last year was 14th in the Power 5. They were second in the Big 12 in time of possession.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think that's interesting is because it's one of the levers you can pull to counteract a full-blown shootout in a game.
Yeah.
If you can hold the ball and prevent your opponent from getting just an incredible number of chances at the goal line, time of possession in their own right, more plays, that is one thing that you can use, I think, in lieu of a great defense. Just keep the offense off the field.
But you need guys on offense to
you need guys, and that's my point, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, if the running back thing doesn't work and they can't match the same level of production, if they don't get the production out wide, even if Will Howard is good and the line in front of him is probably second best in the conference, I worry about the defense collapsing in a conference where shootouts are very common.
Sure.
If the offense can't go to that well again and hold the ball like they did a year ago, are they now at risk of a bunch of shootout games that they just can't keep pace with? The reason that I don't like K-State to win the conference or even get back to that title game is the defense.
Okay.
Because other than linebacker, which is really solid, probably the best linebacker, among the best linebacking core in the conference, it's fully gutted.
Sure.
It's fully gutted. And that frightens me in a conference that has a lot of offense, especially with, big chunks of their own offense in flux here. So
yeah, the only addendum I would offer, and you can tell me if you don't agree, is it also could be a situation where once the newer guys or the newer full-time starters that were rotation guys last year get 4, 5, 6 starts under their belt, maybe Kansas State looks pretty awful early, but by the end of the season, they're in a much better rhythm on defense. There's an evolution over the course of the season that they just need a little bit of time to get their feet wet kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the roster turnover.
Yeah,
on the defensive side of the ball, and how does that work with an offense that may or may not be able to generate explosion plays and hold on to the ball? That leaves me feeling uneasy. I think this team is fine. I would still go over 8.5, frankly. I still feel pretty good about where K-State is at. I'm not pumping the brakes at all, but in terms of getting back to that championship game, playing for a conference title, I don't see that.
So it sounds like this is all a roundabout way that we're saying, all right, Will Howard, let's see if you can do it again with a little bit of less on your side. Yeah,
it is. And more with less is a formula, again, that has proven pretty successful for Chris Kleiman.
Agree.
So I'm over 8.5 on K-State, but with some obvious qualifiers.
You want to go TCU because they played K-State in that championship game, and they won a playoff game last year, so they're worthy of discussion.
13-2 last season. Won a playoff game, lost the national championship.
Yep.
Over under is 7.5 games this year, Dan.
Yeah. So the term I'm using is beefy crunch, which I think is there a beefy crunch wrap, a beefy crunch burrito? I don't know what Taco Bell's offering with beefy crunch. I just know that beefy and crunch go together on some sort of menu. TCU is fascinating. TCU, I think, is going to have a number of successful players on both sides of the ball. The problem is, I don't know if those players are playing on the line of scrimmage.
Okay.
They lose big-time offensive linemen, and the linemen that they do return were part of a unit that was, I think, a little bit too inconsistent for me, especially in short yardage situations. We don't know if Chandler Morris is good. We have a concept that the receivers that they've developed and are coming in should be pretty good. Obviously, they've hit the portal at running back. Trey Sanders is the big name there, but he will be more of a part of a rotation for TCU in the backfield. Losing Garrett Riley, replacing with Kendall Briles, competent, obviously, a pretty good offensive coordinator. There's just a lot new. I believe Sonny Dykes is a good coach, but in the way that we sort of alluded to and talked about Deuce Vaughn, we're talking about Max Duggan as an all-time great TCU quarterback.
Right.
That's difficult to replace, as is replacing an all-time great running back for Kansas State. Even if, Treshaun Ward is pretty good.
That's right.
Like, meets expectations. There's still going to be a drop-off after all-time great performance. So, where does that leave TCU? Well, the defense really took a nice step forward last year. On defense, be it D. Winters, and I mean, everybody on the edge for TCU came on strong last season. But with the new faces and new names and the new guys to depend on the defensive line for TCU, paired with losing key guys elsewhere on that defense, it's, to me, a question of beefy crunch. It's TCU could win and perform in a number of ways, and we saw that defense come on, especially I think it was in Austin the game last year where they really shut down the Longhorns. The question now is, year over year, is that a replicable system? And I believe in Joe Gillespie and that defense, the 3-3-5, sort of attacking from different angles. But right now, for me, for TCU, offensive questions, new faces, and a new line of scrimmage, essentially. I'm waiting to see if that was a 1-year blip of everything coming together, Max Duggan finally being healthy and realizing his potential. Because to me, it seems like TCU will be fun, but not in a winning kind of way consistently.
128th in the nation in returning offensive production.
Yeah.
And they were, I think, somewhat aggressive in the portal. They signed a top 15 transfer class to come in and fill some of those gaps, especially on offense. But that's always a risk, right? That's always a risk. I suppose if you're a better team and you've got deeper pockets and better resources and a better scouting department and maybe a better PR campaign now, especially for TCU after they played for the title, I suppose maybe your risk is a little bit minimized because you have better guys wanting to come to your school, but there's no way to fully mitigate that. There's always a chance that guys could bottom out.
I was surprised they didn't go or land a quarterback in the portal.
Me too. I was
surprised, given their location, given obviously the proximity to a ton of high school talent that goes elsewhere and has the opportunity to come back home to the DFW area. I don't know. Chandler Morris won the job last year. He was the preferred guy for Sonny Dykes. So maybe there's something there. Obviously, he had the big game against Baylor a couple years ago, but that was a little bit surprising that TCU was unable to sort of leverage the momentum of a historic offense and run last year into bringing on, and I don't know who that guy would be. Obviously, Hudson Card's name was associated with TCU before he decided on Purdue, but that was a little bit surprising to me. But given their run last year, given that ceiling, I think they're allowed a grace period. I think they're going to score points with Kendall Briles. I just think it's going to be a lot of back and forth this year. I don't think they're going to be able to rely on the stewardship of Max Duggan in the same way with Chandler Morris back there.
Yeah, and also, not to be overlooked, Chandler Morris is a much different quarterback than Max Duggan. Max Duggan would put his nose down and bull his way to 3 yards. Chandler Morris isn't quite that. He's a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
He's not that guy. And so it's going to look different, at least from that standpoint as well for TCU. Doesn't mean they can't win, and 7.5 is a really interesting number. Schedule's really backloaded for what it's worth. So if it's going to take a little bit to break in some new talent, they'll at least be geared up and ready to go second half of the season. But it just feels like too much new to me. It doesn't mean that TCU is not going to win 8 games. It just means that with all that new, it's tough to envision a repeat effort.
Here's the good news. The schedule, as I see it now, is kind of great.
It's not bad.
Just in terms of home road splits, obviously they're going to open up with what I believe Fox called the most anticipated week 1 matchup of recent times, whatever that means, because they play against Colorado in Fort Worth, I believe. Yeah. But otherwise, you have essentially a rebuilding Houston team on the road, a rebuilding Iowa State offense on the road, a rebuilding, as we talked about, Kansas State on the road. I think it's a Thursday night game. It is a Thursday night game on the road against Texas Tech, but getting Texas at home, TCU just doesn't lose to Texas. No matter who the quarterback is, no matter who the coordinators, who the coaches, they just don't. So there's that to pencil in. I just, it's easy to look in, late July, but it could be worse. For sure could be worse.
The most anticipated week 1.
It was something like that. I don't have the phrasing in front of me.
Fox is paying over $1 billion for this. They got to make it worth the trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you want to go next?
Let's go Oklahoma. Let's go Oklahoma because it's been a school that, look, you're talking about Deion Sanders and Coach Prime in Colorado. I think Brent Venables was just threw shade at, I think, Deion Sanders and also Mario Cristobal, I want to say, in his time.
Threw some elbows. Some elbows.
So let's talk Oklahoma. They've been recruiting well, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, 6-6 last year. Lost the bowl game to Florida State. Their first losing season, so they finished 6-7 overall. First losing season since all the way back in 1998, which was not the future that I think Oklahoma fans had envisioned when they hired one of their own in Brent Venables. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a black guy. Now, the over-under this season is 9.5. Obviously, Vegas is expecting something of a bounce back, and it's not hard to envision why. I can talk through a million reasons why, but the most fascinating thing is the problem from last season. Specifically, how long it takes Brent Venables, I think, to figure out the problem on defense. And specifically to come to my conclusion, Dan, because I'm the only one who knows why, the reason was that he wasn't running it, okay? It's very simple.
Yeah.
This is why it was not good. What I found most fascinating this offseason is nobody really knows the precise reason why Oklahoma's defense didn't work last season. Everybody's got a theory, though, right? Okay. I've got a theory. Every site you read has a theory out there. It was, to be clear, a universal failure on the defensive side of the ball. So was it the scheme? Was it the coaching? Was it the players themselves? The numbers were bad. I can sit here and read off numbers if you want. They underperformed projections 8 out of 13 games. And when they fell short, they really fell short. Yep. 6 of those games were by double digits in terms of, again, the defensive projection. Blitzes didn't get home. The tackle success rate was really bad, 116th nationally. They were bad in the red zone. They were 125th nationally in percentage of passes where the opponent was deemed wide open. If you want a deep cut.
I like that.
So just a lot went wrong.
Well, one might argue that an Oklahoma defense being disappointing and leaky is the most Oklahoma thing, that Brent Venables truly embodied what an Oklahoma head coach should bring to the table, a disappointing defense, right?
True to the brand. Exactly. We had Eddie Radosevich from Sooner Scoop on our show months ago, and we poked at this a little bit. And we said, why didn't this work? Mm-hmm. And he basically gave us the shrug emoji. Eddie, who's as in the know as anybody with respect to Oklahoma football, he didn't know. It's there. Everybody's got a theory. Nobody really knows exactly why. But what we do know is that the presumed best defensive coordinator in America, getting the head job at your school, should not lead a defensive unit that is 70th overall.
Right.
That can't happen. My theory, as I said from the mountaintop, and I will say until I'm blue in the face, is that Brent Venables, in figuring out on his own how to be a head coach, gave way too much responsibility to Ted Roof.
Well, sure.
And I'm sure Ted Roof is a great guy. Everybody seems to like him. He's never had trouble getting work. Okay. Yeah. He's just not good at this anymore.
Brings warm cookies to his interviews. Yeah.
He's not good at this anymore, Dan. It's been 15 years since Ted Roof was good at this.
Yeah.
He's not good at coaching defense any longer. My friends and I still text about the leaky roof years at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma fans, you can borrow that if you want. It's fine. It's fine. That is my theory as to where it went wrong. And I give Brent Venables the benefit of the doubt because I think he will figure it out. I think he's a sharp guy, obviously knows how to coach defense. But I think the longer we go without him just sort of taking away that responsibility from Ted Roof, the worse off Oklahoma will be. Maybe that's already happened in the offseason.
Right.
He's kind of played coy with what responsibilities are and aren't for his staff, especially on defense. But that, to me, I think has got to be the problem. Just get him away from the defense, man. Get him away. Let Brent Venables call it. We know he can do that. He's got that track record. For what it's worth, nobody's really panicking. And that I see that as a good sign. The recruits aren't panicking either out of high school or via the transfer portal. Oklahoma had the number 4 high school recruiting class. 8 of their top 10 guys were defenders. They also had the number 9 transfer class with, I think, 6 starters being pulled from other Power 5 rosters. So guys still want to play for Brent Venables, still want to play for this defense. One down year, which, to be fair, was like on the same footing as where Lincoln Riley was before he left.
Right.
It just didn't live up to Venables' expectations. 1 year like that isn't going to scare guys away. And so on paper, they're talented and they're very deep. And I think Brent Venables is going to figure it out pretty quickly that it's not a talent problem. It's we need better guys calling the plays. So that, to me, that's the point of intrigue for Oklahoma. I don't know if I played the ding, but the ding is the problem itself. The problem was unexpected last season. We didn't necessarily see it coming. I don't think he handled it well, but I'm willing to give him a free pass because he's Brent Venables. That dude knows how to coach defense.
So what you're saying is a roster of players who were very rarely good at playing defense before Brent Venables arrived were also disappointing on defense when Brent Venables arrived.
I believe that's accurate, yeah.
Because you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not sure why. Did they go after a bunch of dudes in the portal this year?
They did. No, they were very aggressive in the portal.
Okay.
They're very aggressive in the portal.
Obviously, they'll try to get freshmen in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, look, they are deeper and more talented this year on defense. And so whenever your high school recruiting class has that strong of an emphasis on the defensive side of the ball, there's no two ways about it. Brent Venables looked at the talent, and he said, we need to get better. We need to improve. Now, I don't know.
Right.
You'd have to ask him what he sees in this new crop of guys coming in via high school, via the transfer portal. But that was clearly an area of focus. If nothing more, he's going to root out talent as the cause for any kind of defensive lapses because they're really good. They're really good from a talent standpoint on that side of the ball.
It did seem like they were taking steps forward like 2/3 of the way into the season, but then they had, it was a shootout against Texas Tech to finish out this season, so wasn't completely finished. So I'm with you. I think it'll improve. I think the recruiting, they've always recruited well, though, right? Like Lincoln Riley and Bob Stoops brought in a lot of blue chip type defensive talent and guys that were drafted from disappointing defenses. So I guess it's whether it's Brent Venables, whether it's Ted Roof, if somebody needs to put everything together and figure things out and how to get the most out of the players that they do have, because you're right, they should have a deep defense these next couple years based on what they're doing. The
recruiting's been incredible, which actually brings me to a second point. If I can make another point.
Please.
Point number 8 here in the Big 12. We're up to 8 already.
Please.
The second most fascinating thing to keep an eye on at Oklahoma is their pool of talent at quarterback. And what I think it could mean for their scheme and Jeff Lebby. Last year, bear in mind, Dylan Gabriel went down, and it was Davis Bevel for part of the TCU game and all of the Texas game where they got shut out 49-0.
Yeah.
This year, it's Jackson Arnold, who was, I believe, the number 2 quarterback in the previous class, waiting in the wings. I think it changes the calculus a little bit. There are more guys behind him, right? I think that changes the calculus a little bit because last season, at least down the stretch, I think they were afraid to use Dylan Gabriel for what he's really good at. He's a hell of a runner.
Yeah, or at least, rolling out and buying himself time and improvising. Yeah.
Either they were afraid to call some of the plays to put him in that position, or he was tentative about doing it because he got hurt previously. But I would like to see Dylan Gabriel on the move a little bit more because he's such a good runner. Mm-hmm. They put him on the move. Maybe they're more inclined to put him on the move now that they've got better depth behind him and have to worry about him getting hurt because they like what they have behind him. I just think that's a possibility that in going through the depth chart and what they did last season and how it looked down the stretch when things really kind of bottomed out, that to me, I think is an intriguing possibility. So, on the whole, my take with Oklahoma is there's no reason really to be that concerned about the offense. There was a bit of a step back last season, but Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and Mario, like all these guys left. So of course there's going to be something of a step back. They just weren't as talented, but still they were 10th in the country. So they're fine. They're good. They'll be just as good again. The reality though is that Oklahoma just wasn't good enough on offense alone to roll, through that schedule. This season, I think they'll be good enough on offense to probably roll 11 of the defenses on their schedule. It's a really good schedule. And there are probably only 4 or 5 opponents that scare me in terms of being able to score on what Oklahoma has. Mm-hmm. I'm on the over 9.5 here. And I feel good about it. I think anything short of 9-3 with this team, with this schedule, is an abject failure.
How many good quarterbacks are on their schedule as you see it? I guess depending on what you think about Preston Stone Preston, they play SMU, correct? Oklahoma does. There may be 2, and that's a maybe. So they have Jalen Daniels and Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers was a pretty awful second half quarterback, especially in the fourth quarter. Jalen Daniels, I think, is full on really good. But you look at the list of quarterbacks that an aspiring, competent Oklahoma defense has to face.
Yeah, you have to broaden it. You can't just look in terms of quarterbacks, because the quarterback class at the very top of the Big 12, I think, is pretty slim. Like the really top tier.
No, that's what I'm saying though. Like we don't know about Chandler Morris, and they miss Will Howard, and so it's a pretty good place to be. I guess if you're an Alan Bowman believer, British comedy legend Alan Bowman, but like, it's a slapper's row. I don't know.
It's a beautiful schedule. It's a beautiful. That's why I say anything short of 9-3 is a failure.
I'm with you. Totally with you. Where do you want to go?
I want to go to Texas now. Let's stick within the confines here of the Red River Shootout, Dan. Texas Longhorns this season entering a very, very interesting spot. 9.5 is their over-under. They went 8-5 a year ago. There were a couple problems that held them back from a bigger season, which I'm sure we can discuss a little bit, but what is the most fascinating thing about the Texas Longhorns?
They are probably going to be a drum roll team again. A drum roll as in, here's what you hear before that high leverage moment, and what do you do when the ball is snapped? And it's fourth quarters, it's overtimes, it's fourth down, it's second halves, it's things start going wrong in the second half. Okay, they're coming back out, they're trotting back on the field. What are they going to do to correct things? It's a drum roll problem for Texas. Last year, it's going to be a drum roll question this year because it's not a talent thing. I don't think it's a coaching thing because I think there are good coaches on both sides of the ball. It's not a depth thing. I don't think it's a line play thing. It's not a speed thing. Look, they had Bijan Robinson last year. He was incredible. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a red zone thing as well. And so that to me is going to be the enormous question, the enormous spotlight, and the enormous talking point if they're able to get their act together in those moments this year. Because I don't see a game on their schedule after the Alabama game. I think the Big 12 slate appears to be ideal in terms of the home road splits and the teams that they play. I think the defense is going to continue to get better. We'll see where they are at corner. I think they're good at the top, but a little bit thin depth-wise. They've got star power, it seems, at both wide receiver and tight end. I think they'll be fine at running back because they're running behind a terrific line. If Quinn Ewers takes a step forward, cut off the mullet, maybe that's, streamlining his head, both literally and figuratively. Exactly. It's all just, what does Quinn Ewers do on 3rd and 9 late in the third quarter in a close game? It's all, what does he do on 3rd and goal from the 4-yard line? It's that to me is the thing. I saw a stat, I think it was from Bill Connolly, that they were horrendous at other teams converting fourth downs. They were like 87th nationally at being converted on, right? When the defense was on the field on fourth down. Did I say third down? I meant fourth down. And then after Texas allowed a fourth down conversion, they almost always allowed a touchdown. Like it mentally broke them to give up a fourth down conversion. Yeah. So that to me is everything. Once again, I'll go back to it. It's drum roll because they should have disruptive players along the defensive line and all over that defense. And look, I'm still a little bit heartbroken that Oregon lost Kelvin Banks when Mario Cristobal left. Yeah. He is, I don't know, is he the best left tackle in the sport? Quite possibly.
Yeah.
And so every building block is there for Texas to win 10 or 11 games. It's just, how many times are we going to say over the course of the season, if you're Texas, you just can't lose to blah-bitty-blah. Not like that. Not like that. So that's everything to me. And I don't know if it's oversimplifying things, but when you recruit like Texas has consistently done, it's how are you mentally during the game with so many perceived advantages? And that's where we are. It's just a drum roll thing.
We're in year 3 under Sark. He's had ample opportunity now to build this thing in his image. And I think if you're comparing position groups, the best lines, offensive and defensive, in the conference, maybe not the best linebacking core. I think K-State probably has them beaten there, but they're not far off. Probably the best secondary. Defensively, they're very, very sound. And we know that they have amassed a lot of skill talent. Now, losing Bijan Robinson hurts. But Quinn Ewers, I think, stands to take a step forward. Hopefully he stays healthy this season. The receiver room, the tight end position, they're loaded there. They're loaded there. It's all kind of in position for Texas. And I don't think it's an easy schedule by any stretch. They will have ample opportunity to showcase what they can do against better competition. But this is why people are excited. We've gotten questions about why are people excited about Texas this year? What is different this year? The difference is that this has been a slow build, responsible build to get to the point where we're at now. And they have been built in a very, very solid way from the inside out.
I mean, look, if Texas takes the field with Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Whittington, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, whatever, if they have packages featuring 4 or 5 of those guys at the same time, how many Big 12 secondaries can match up? How many Big 12 defenses have a pair of rush ends that will confuse and bother Quinn Ewers with the line in front of Quinn Ewers to the point where he doesn't have time to let one of those guys develop into a route? Everything is there for Texas to just demolish teams week in and week out. But we say that year in and year out. And so it's going to be those moments. That's all. Look, this is not a novel way of looking at Texas, but I'm not sure there's another way to say, Texas needs to prove it.
We took a look at the 2 contenders and 2 non-tenders, as I've clunkily referred to them.
Non-tenders. Yeah, if I were to ask you, what is everything that's not on the Canes menu? You'd say non-tenders.
Non-tender.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the 4 newcomers.
Okay.
The 4 newcomers to the conference. You had SMU, Houston and BYU, and I had Cincinnati and UCF. Of those 2 schools that you looked at a little bit more closely, which do you feel better about and why?
Better about?
Yeah, Houston or BYU?
Houston. Because I have my concerns about each of those defenses, but I'd rather enter a game with Donovan Smith than Keaton Slovis.
Interesting.
And the combination of Dana Holgorsen and Donovan Smith. Because even though they lose Alton McCaskill to Colorado in the spring, which was kind of a surprise. He sat out last year injured. But I like at least the starting point. Houston's got a great left tackle. And Dana Holgorsen has been a major conference coach. And so he has familiarity with, elevating a program to that level. And I don't know. I don't love the Houston defense. They took such a big step back last year. They're somewhat active in the portal, which I like. And I'm more confident in Houston winning games 45-42 than BYU. Because, BYU returns a ton, I believe, but you're talking about returning guys that were crazy disappointing last year on defense. So I'll roll with Houston. I think they're better positioned to fill up this roster with interesting talent. Once again, maybe guys returning home to East Texas. And we know that, a couple of years ago, I think it's Doug Belk is their defensive coordinator, what they were able to do, especially up front. Sac Avenue, Ty, I believe.
Yeah, Sac Ave.
Yeah, you wrote a whole song about that in high school, but that's another show. I'm I would roll the dice on Houston before BYU at this point, just because of the combination coach and quarterback.
What is your point of fascination with BYU, just out of curiosity?
They fielded a pretty terrible defense last year. They lose game-changing dudes on offense. I think it's Puka Nacua and Gunnar Romney at receiver. They have experience at receiver, but it's hard to see precisely where the star power is coming from. Houston loses their, he was their best receiver for 2 or 3 years in Tank Dell, but they're going after guys in the portal that I think will be serviceable. Stephon Johnson, a speedy dude from Oklahoma State, steps in at Houston that I want to see something excellent from a team, and I just think Houston has a better chance of finding that excellence if it's a receiver, if it's, short yardage stuff, if it's getting creative on defense. I'm just not there with BYU.
Wow, I'm not there at all with Houston.
Oh, I think Houston's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think Houston's really bad on the lines, and that's not to say that the Big 12 is a line league. The Big 12 is an offensive league, a shootout league.
Yeah.
But I just think they're going to be really overmatched.
Oh, I don't think they're going to be good. I have it written down here on the caffeine theme of Dana Holgerson, who loves Red Bulls. I have half and half, which is coffee, because I don't believe Houston is going to put up much of a fight on defense this year.
Okay.
But if you're saying who is the feisty team that you should beat, but at any point, wasn't it Houston and SMU who scored 159 points last year in a game together? Where it's just any given week, Dana Holgerson sees a wrinkle in somebody's defense or sees a nickel who should not be playing in the Big 12 and just torches him with a slot receiver going for 281 yards. I'll give that to Dana Holgerson over Kalani Sitake and Keaton Slovis.
I think both these schools are in for a rude awakening as they enter the Big 12. I think both are equipped to adjust quickly, but it's just a speed bump.
Oh, I think Houston is much more equipped to adjust to the Big 12, given geography, given height of the program more often recently, given Dana Holgerson. I would say Houston could be one of the biggest beneficiaries. Now, I don't know where their NIL situation is. I don't know if it's just Tillman Fertitta still giving them someone Fertitta, owner of the Houston Rockets, who has been very involved in Houston football for a while. I don't know how competitive they are in the portal. But if you're talking about any of these programs entering the conference and their new ceiling, I think it's a more pronounced jump for Houston than UCF, Cincinnati, or BYU because of location, because the conference is still essentially based in the state of Texas, given the sheer number of teams that will still be located in the Lone Star State. I think Houston would be the proximity to SEC transfers and A&M transfer. I just think they're the team that hypothetically has the most to gain from entering this conference.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on UCF. And I've got 2 reasons.
Okay.
Why? 2 fascination points for me with this team. By the way, 9-5 last year, lost the American Championship to Tulane, lost the bowl game to Duke. They're over under this year, 6.5. The first is your boy John Rice Plumlee. It's Rice, not Reese, correct?
Correct.
John Rice Plumlee. I'll throw the dude alert out there right now. I don't have the sound. Actually, I do. Early dude alert here in the previews. That hit me loud. Yeah. UCF's going to build the whole plane out of him this year.
Cool.
And it's interesting because the receiver room actually is in pretty good shape, but that's just not the game they play with them. Last season was, I think, a bit of a tell of what we should expect. They had 5 leading rushers who combined for over 3,000 yards and 32 touchdowns. This is a running team. They're going to run JRP like crazy this season. 159 attempts last year. I bet you he ends up with more this year. I don't know if that's sustainable, but it is interesting. And it is a point of fascination going into a new conference. That's the first thing. The second thing for me is I think the simple fact that as we look at these 4 newcomers, UCF is the best positioned right now to step in and maybe throw some haymakers because I think they can score.
That might be the only thing they're throwing successfully
well,
this
maybe.
year.
Maybe. And that's a quality joke, Dan. I appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
But I think it's a question of defense. I think they can score, but the question is, How does the defense hold against better competition? I do like the defense because they bring back 7 starters. They did a good job filling in the gaps through the portal. And as a whole, the team actually has pretty good depth. We talk often about group of 5 teams. And one of the issues when they play against Power 5 teams is that they don't have the depth. UCF doesn't really fit that bill. They've got good depth there. It's just a lot harder now against this competition. And I think it could take a while until the level of recruiting catches up with where it needs to be in order to be truly competitive. But I like where they're at, and I think they're in a good position going into the season. I would flirt with the over 6.5. Flirt with it. I'm not a huge John Rice Plumlee believer, but I do think it at least makes for interesting TV.
Yeah, I think that might be starting a left fielder at quarterback.
They are. They absolutely. I mean, the only reason he's here.
I think he played baseball at Ole Miss. Yeah.
Well, the only reason he's here, is because he wanted to play quarterback, 1, for the football team, and Ole Miss wanted to move him. And 2, he also wanted to play baseball, and UCF allowed him to do both.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of receivers on Sunday morning saying, bro, I was so open so often.
But that's not the game. The game, it's a Gus Malzahn team. It's a Herb Hand team. They want to run the crap out of the ball.
I know.
That's what they're going to do.
But I think that caps you.
It does cap
you a little bit.
It does.
So, yeah, UCF is fascinating to me because they're on an island in the Big 12. Sort of big picture that if you're like a high 3-star Floridian, you're probably not going to UCF. I mean, you want to stay home, but none of your games are going to be anywhere near Florida. It's sort of difficult for you're asking your family to go to Ames or Lubbock or I don't know. It's Fort Worth. It's nowhere near. So, we'll see. But I would venture to guess that UCF is going to be a good team in the Big 12. They will be near the top, probably more often than not, 2 out of 3 years, 3 out of 5 years, or something like that. I just don't see them having more pop than like a 9-win season every so often in the Big 12.
Well, that's I think pretty fair.
Yeah. Where are we going next?
Should we round it out with Cincinnati? I have Cincinnati thoughts, man.
Cincinnati is in a tough place, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. It's a triple whammy, and I'm not going to play it 3 times. I'll play it once.
Yeah.
Up to 16 now, by the way, in the Big 12.
Okay.
It's a triple whammy. Look, Luke Fickell left, and Cincinnati responded by hiring Scott Satterfield?
Well, sure.
Question mark intended?
Yeah.
Scott Satterfield? Really? You know how I said last episode I'm fascinated by things I don't understand?
Running from the posse at Louisville. Yeah.
I don't understand this. They basically did Louisville a favor by hiring him away.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Louisville wanted him. It wasn't going well. The story at Louisville was consistent inconsistency. So they hire him away. Now Louisville gets the guy they really wanted all along, Jeff Brom. Go figure. Scott Satterfield was very successful. You mentioned it earlier. Was, past tense, very successful at App State. But it never got going for one reason or another at Louisville. So now Cincinnati signed up for that. I don't get it. It also comes at a very interesting time because point 2, Cincy is like full Control-Alt-Delete with the roster. Almost everything is new. They have full reboot, quarterback, backfield, the line, the receivers. Cincinnati lost their top 8 receivers. I said that to you last night.
Yeah.
Their top 8 receivers are all gone. The defensive line, I guess, is in a good place, but everything else is really a huge question mark on defense. And on top of it all, point 3, the schedule got a lot harder. They're moving to a better conference. So I'm a hard sell on Cincinnati this season. I don't think they'll be good. I don't have faith in Scott Satterfield at all. I don't think he makes them good. I am morbidly curious to see if he tries to make Emory Jones into his version of Malik Cunningham. That could at least be interesting and fodder for the show. I feel like that's coming and there's no avoiding it. I don't think that's a good move either. I'm just really in a down state with Cincinnati right now. Like, I don't like this at all. I don't like this circumstance at all. It's all hitting at once. Like all the charges on your credit card bill hitting at the wrong time. That's where we're at with Cincinnati, the old triple whammy.
I don't love this staff. I know people like Brian Brown a lot, the defensive coordinator, and obviously Louisville's defense took a nice step forward last year, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of the staff. I I'm just not a fan big picture of like, well, this coach has been disappointing. Let's hire him. That's not
exactly. I don't get it.
My thing. But conversely, Cincinnati has traditionally been a place where good coaches win. So this should be
I don't know, man. Not this time.
Referendum on Scott Satterfield. If Scott Satterfield is a good coach, not a great coach, if he's a good coach, which it seemed like he was going to be at App State, he should win. Brian Kelly, good coach, won in Cincinnati. Luke Fickell, good coach, Cincinnati. Tommy Tuberville, all-around disappointing coach, didn't win at Cincinnati in the same way. So I
don't think he's a bad coach. I don't mean to imply that the guy's a bad coach. I don't believe that. I think he's I think he's okay. But there was something at Louisville that I found really disturbing, and that was they had enough talent and they were good enough to be in most of these games.
Yeah.
And they were continuously shooting themselves in the foot. And, I mean, we're talking about guys who are 18 to 22, in some cases older.
Yeah.
In the case of Alan Bowman, he might be 28 at this point. I don't know how old Alan Bowman is. But these are all young guys, and mistakes happen. But when they happen that consistently, it's coaching. It's coaching. The fact that he couldn't root that out, it's coaching. And that with a new roster and in a stronger conference with a tougher schedule, I don't know. I don't like that at all.
Here's the great news, though. If you remove Scott Satterfield's reputation and you just talk about Cincinnati, a team that should always have been a major conference team. They spend, they recruit, they behave. I guess that's fine.
I thought you were going to say behead, but that's better.
Behave. They operate as a major conference team, and they have been operating as a major conference team, and they were in the college football playoff 2 years ago. So the right coach, if it's Scott Satterfield, if it's not Scott Satterfield, can build a high quality roster that can beat 93%, 97% of college football teams at Cincinnati. Luke Fickell might be a uniquely great coach at this point in his career, and he's not there anymore. But Cincinnati gives you that platform to win on a major level that I don't think a lot of the programs in the conference give their respective coaches.
We've got a couple teams left here to discuss. We've got Texas Tech. We've got Baylor. Mm-hmm. We've got Oklahoma State. We've got Iowa State. And we've got Kansas. Why don't you knock out Texas Tech? Because Texas Tech fascinates me.
I love Texas Tech.
What fascinates you about Texas Tech?
I think they have very specific visions for both sides of the ball. Right? They know what they're doing with Zach Kitley on offense. They have a quality quarterback in Tyler Shuck. We'll see on star power at the skill positions. I think the offensive line should be better this year. They were bit by the injury bug last year. They were super inconsistent last year. They need to hit on bigger plays. It can't just be the short stuff on offense. But the big deal to me is they're running a very specific system on offense and a very specific system with Tim DeRuyter on defense. The defensive thing is I think they have depth along the line, but it's like a star power thing. It's probably a star power thing on both sides of the ball. Like, it's a Hall of Pretty Good. Isn't that the old joke about the Hall of Fame? Like, how many games does Pretty Good win you in the 2023 Big 12? You look at Texas Tech's schedule, could be 9, right? Yeah. If Texas Tech is consistently pretty good, if they don't do anything fully terribly, whether it's play deep passes, whether it's run fits, whether it's, handling edge rushers, whatever. If everything is competent for Texas Tech, if it all comes together in a nice, competent morass, I think the Red Raiders can win 8 or 9 games. Isn't that a great word, morass? I hope I used it right. That to me is the advantage that Texas Tech holds. It's quality coaching. It's what appears to be quality culture under Joey McGuire. They're active in the portal. They're decent recruiters. And I think that's sort of, even though it's pretty early on in Joey McGuire's tenure, I think it's that sort of solid foundation that gives Texas Tech a leg up. They know they can beat teams that have more talent. Lubbock's a weird place to play. They've got an absolute home field advantage. I think they check a lot of boxes in a weird year, in a weird transition year for the conference. So I'm up on Tech. I think they're going to do a lot of things at like a B+ level. And I don't know if a lot of teams can say that.
Yeah, for me, if you're a Texas Tech season ticket holder,
yeah,
some really good home games. Get Oregon at home. You get Houston at home, which is, in-state game now, conference rivalry.
Might as well be 4 states away, the difference geographically between Lubbock and Houston, but you're right.
You get Kansas State. You get a Thursday night game at home against TCU, and then you close things out the home schedule anyway against UCF. It's a pretty good slate of home games. Even the road games don't frighten me too much.
Right.
2 West Virginia, 2 Baylor, 2 BYU, 2 Wyoming to open up the year. Kansas will be probably a shootout, close out the year against Texas on a Friday night. But I think it's very workable if you're Texas Tech. The other thing I would add, this is a pretty good offense last season. I don't know what it looks like this year with Tyler Shuck, provided he can stay healthy, but I like Zach Kitley. I think he runs a very specific system. As you said, It seems like there's a vision. And even though the defense was lacking last season, Joey McGuire, his pedigree is as a defensive coach. That's sort of his MO. And so I think given time, he can build this thing into a program that's very, very interesting. Remember, the conference is changing. Starting next year, the conference is changing in a big way. There's a land grab of sorts in the Big 12. And I think Texas Tech, under this guy, obviously he knows the state of Texas. That's why they hired him. Mm-hmm. There's a culture element here that we feel good about, kind of in a Kansas State way, right? Like, it just feels like there's a lot of alignment there across the board. And that's really exciting. Really exciting for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be preventing and generating bigger plays, which I think is totally doable. Considering where I think the roster is improving to this year overall, even, again, losing some star power on both sides of the ball. I'm in. You got to be in on somebody. I'm in on Texas Tech.
Here's my question now about Texas Tech as we go to point number 18.
Yeah.
Is Texas Tech in a better place than Baylor?
Yeah. I think so.
In the moment or long term or both?
Hard to say both because Baylor just won the conference a couple of years ago. Held on. Well, that was the game where it was Oklahoma State came up like 4.5 inches short of winning the Big 12. Yep. So I like Dave Aranda a good deal, but I think there's less to like about the Baylor defense from a talent standpoint right now. They're also trying to correct an offensive line. Not a Blake Shapen guy. I don't think much of the Baylor fan universe is a Blake Shapen guy. You have a promising running back in Richard Reese, of course.
He might be the best running back in the conference.
Could absolutely be the best running back in the conference, but who he's running behind, it's Monterey Baldwin, right? That's the extraordinary name that I'm thinking of because it is a great name. It's firepower on offense. It's figuring out what exactly they want to be on both sides of the ball. Like, what are we going for here, Baylor? Like, they bring back Matt Polidge from Oregon, who was hired to be a co-defense coordinator. Now he's back as the defensive coordinator. They make that change. When you look at the roster, when you look at recent results, it's hard to pin down an exact identity for me on what this Baylor team is trying to do and is trying to be. And so they were successful. We talked about this. I think it's when they played BYU last year, if I remember correctly.
Jeff Grimes Bowl, yeah.
Right. So Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator, really well regarded, but whatever, this is the opposite of explosive was last year. It was, what did we call this? It was Baylor playing in a phone booth. It was pickleball offense. If I remember my dumb phraseology correctly, is Baylor doing anything to get out of the pickleball mold this year? To stretch the field, to play with more creativity, with more speed, tempo, whatever. That to me is the ongoing narrative of Baylor, because what are they doing well? They have a very good running back, but how are they making the most of him or the threat of him in the play action game with Blake Shapen going downfield? Because the Blake Shapen experience is watching a drive and saying, all right, this guy's getting comfortable. He's figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And then throwing in the next 3 drives of being mystified by what Blake Shapen is trying to do. So I'm just sitting back and waiting to see what happens with Baylor, because it's unclear to me at the moment.
Yeah, 7.5 is the Texas Tech over-under, by the way. I didn't mention that. 7 for Baylor. So they're about neck and neck per Vegas. The interest, I jotted down nature versus nurture for Baylor. We'll ding it again. Point number 19. Baylor is taking on some serious water along the lines.
Yeah. I think the edge guys are back on defense, which is a great start, right? That can cover for a lot.
But especially on the offensive line, they're taking on some water. And I think especially in the back 7. And I am heartened by the fact that I think this coaching staff has the know-how to fix those things.
I hope so.
Right. I think they've got a track record for fixing those things. But and I like Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda is a thoughtful guy. He got really innovative in year 2 to fix what was wrong. Then maybe he can do the same again here. But it's the vision thing is something that I came back to as well. Frankly, like where are we going with this? Baylor's schedule, by the way, and we mentioned this back in the schedule preview a couple months ago. If you want to go back and listen to that, 4 road games, and on the road just once before week 8, and that's pretty good, right? They get both Utah and Texas at home in that stretch, which is nice. Their road games are UCF, Cincinnati, K-State, and TCU on back-to-back weeks. But there's a little bit of a gump factor to the schedule, Dan, because they get both K-State and TCU a week after each of those teams plays Texas. So really good home road splits if you're a Baylor fan, just something that, I don't know if that works to their advantage or not, but figured I'd note that again quickly here.
More happy kolaches or sad kolaches for Baylor fans this year?
I think sad.
You think more sad kolache? I don't know what the saddest kolache is. Maybe somebody from Central Texas can weigh in.
I'm not a Baylor believer.
Okay. The vision of the image of somebody eating a sad kolache, I guess it would be like, is it a pastry? It's a flaky something filled with, I guess, cheese or fruit or meat or something like that. Sad kolache is a funny thing bouncing through my head.
Do you want to round things out with Iowa State, and then I can finish off with Oklahoma State and Kansas?
Yes. There is very little reason to believe Iowa State's season will appear to be terribly different, even though they make a change at offensive coordinator than where it was last year.
Hold on. Nathan Scheelhaus.
Yeah, get old.
Nathan Scheelhaus.
I remember
him, the offensive coordinator.
I think I remember him as a recruit that Illinois friends were excited that, was he from St. Louis, somewhere down there, for Illinois as a quarterback, a one-time quarterback, is now, he's 32?
Oh, my God.
Man. And it's Nathan Scheelhaus Jr., by the way. It's his kid who's the offensive coordinator.
It's not.
No.
Stop.
So he steps in. So he's an internal hire. They part ways with Tom Manning. And I think Iowa State's going to have a good defense. They've got a lot to prove still on defense, but they still get, year in and year out, John Haycock fields really good defenses.
He does. What I worry about, though, with the defense is that it'll still be good. I agree. It'll still be fine. But it's been a crutch for the offense. I don't know if it's good enough to be a crutch in the way that it's been in the past.
But they could win games 13-10 instead of losing games 13-10, right? The actual, if you have macular degeneration and you can barely make out an Iowa State game on TV, it'll probably look really similar. Yeah. Probably. Just because I don't think Matt Campbell offenses are going to all of a sudden become super explosive and play quickly. I think they're still going to be there to serve the defense. The defense is still going to be very confusing for opposing quarterbacks. That sort of 3-2-6 defense that Haycock pioneered, I think, in the conference. It's going to look the same. It's just a matter of, again, maybe it's sort of that Texas drumroll moment, please. If in the red zone they don't fumble it, and instead of fumbling it, they kick a successful field goal or something like that. So I think the universe can balance itself out, and they can get back to 7 or 8 wins. But I don't expect things to look terribly different. I don't love Hunter Deckers. Maybe it's a move to J.J. Cole at some point this year. But otherwise, no, more of the same. And I have no idea what that means. I really don't. And I hope for the sake of Iowa State fans that I'm wrong, that it does look more modern and exciting under Nathan Scheelhaus. And last year was a growing pains thing for a youngish offense. But otherwise?
Well, 4-8 last year. And they had a lot to replace.
Yeah,
they had a lot to replace last season, not the least of which was Breece Hall, who was their do-everything star running back who was drafted very highly into the NFL. The over-under now is 5.5. You said 7 or 8 wins. Did I hear that?
Well, look, if your starting point is a very, very good defense, there's no conference where you won't win 7 or 8 games, right?
Wow. Okay.
Now, Their offense was at times catastrophically bad last year, which does erase a lot. But they lost close games last year. I'm pulling up their schedule. So I don't know. If they can win a few more moments, they lose by 7 to Baylor. They lose by 3 to Kansas. They lose by 1 to Kansas State. They lose by 3 to Texas. Now, there's a reason you lose, right? I'm not going to say like those bounced the other way last year and they're an impressive team. There's a reason they scored 11 points and 9 points and all those things. So they absolutely were, you said, a 4-win team last year?
4-8, yeah.
That's what 4-win teams do. They lose games. So I just think with the benefit of an offseason, and I am giving the benefit to a good head coach and a good defensive coordinator and a change on offense, that they can do some things slightly better and win more games. Yeah.
I forgot to mention West Virginia as well. Let's go to West Virginia. No disrespect to the ears, Dan.
Nope, it's too late, Ty.
The most fascinating thing about West Virginia, by the way, 5-7 last year. They're 4.5 over/under. The most fascinating thing I think about the Mountaineers this season is that there is a switcheroo going on with the scheme this season. West Virginia returns 12% of his production at receiver and tight end.
That's a very specific percentage.
The top 4 wide receivers, their top 2 tight ends, their receiving coach are all gone, and now Graham Harrell is out.
No,
Obviously, this is a system under Graham Harrell that emphasized more air raid, and it didn't work out. And I agree that it's a good thing that he is gone. They did land Devin Carter from NC State via Penn State, which should help in their receiver production. But they're really incredibly thin out wide. And the quarterback position's up in the air between Garrett Green and Nico Marichal. So I think what that means, obviously, is no more air raid. And West Virginia is fascinating because they have a very specific way they will try to beat you. And that is to run the ever-loving crap out of the football with C.J. Donaldson, who's very good.
No. C.J. Donaldson is incredible.
He's incredible.
Thank you.
Incredible.
And now he's healthy, hopefully. Yeah.
Now he's healthy, up to 23 points, by the way.
Yeah.
C.J. Donaldson is very good and healthy. The receiver thing is kind of separate from the fact that the running back room is very, very solid. And the offensive line is one of the best in the conference. So if you're Neil Brown, you're going to run the crap out of the ball. It's going to be a run-heavy offense. Total contrast to what they did last season, which makes it interesting, I think, on some level. I don't know if it'll be successful, but at least interesting. If they can keep the defense off the field by running the crap out of the football, that'd be a huge dub in my book.
That'd be good.
Because there are a ton of losses defensively, and I think they could be really bad. Really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at these. 9.1 yards, air yards per attempt last season, which was bad. They lost 6 times by double digits. Field position was really bad. They're bad at creating big plays, good at giving them up. Like all the stuff that you would expect from a bad team, they kind of had that going on. I don't like West Virginia at all this season. And we talked about that at length when we did the schedule preview, and we did some interviews a couple of months ago talking about what was preventing West Virginia from getting to that next level. I think the only reason they didn't fire their coach was because they didn't want to pay the buyout.
Right.
Either.
Sure.
Which is not, I mean, practically speaking, it's a lot more logical than what's going on around college football in other parts of the country, right? At least save the money while you can. But I think if they had their druthers and if it wasn't so much of a buyout situation, this guy would already be gone. And I feel bad saying that because we really liked Neil Brown when he came over from Troy. You and I were both convinced he was a stud hire. I just don't know how many off seasons we can go with this guy where it's the same line year after year. Well, we got to make changes.
Right.
Well, we got to make change. Every year, Neil Brown got to make changes. And that's just getting a little long in the tooth, man. At some point, it's put up or shut up. And I think this is the year. I like the rushing attack. I think it'll be interesting to follow. I know we'll be interested in it. 4.5 is the over-under for a good reason. I don't know if it's going to equate to a whole lot of dubs on the field. So run the crap out of the ball. Let's make it the C.J. Donaldson show. I'm cool with that, man. But in terms of wins and I don't know. I'm just out. I'm out.
Yeah, I think the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah. Kansas and Oklahoma State, Dan. Which one intrigues you more?
Kansas, of course. Kansas.
Kansas. Was Kansas the story of the year last year?
Yeah. Especially there was like a month stretch where, well, then Jalen Daniels gets hurt, but then there's no drop. Like, they were super fun last year, and they were a pretty major threat most of the weeks of the season. Yeah.
Earned their first AP ranking since 2009 and went to a bowl game for the first time since 2008. Think about that for a second. 2008. Four coaches came and went without going to a bowl game. Turner Gill, Charlie Weiss, Les Miles, and David Beatty in no particular order. None of those guys went to a bowl game. So it was momentous to get to the bowl. It was momentous just to host game day for the first time, which was freaking cool.
Yeah.
So to go from a laughingstock to a bowl now in year 2 under Lance Leipold, like, that's awesome.
Yeah, but, well, now this would be my narrative headline. There are expectations of Kansas, and there have never been expectations, well, in the modern era since, 07, 08. And so that's new.
That's very new. And I was drawing a parallel in my head when I went through this preview to what we just talked about with Jed Fish at Arizona. Because Jed Fish's first prime directive was to make the offense better. Mm-hmm. Make Arizona fun. And he did that. They were very good offensively last year. They stunk on defense just like Kansas. Kansas might have been worse.
Yeah.
But Lance Leipold now knows that this is how he's going to have to move this thing forward. He has to get the defense humming at a better frequency, let's say. I don't know if he will do that. And we can talk about that. But the most fascinating thing for me about Kansas, point 25, they're the best TV show in the Big 12.
Yeah.
They're the best TV show because the offense was genuinely good. It was a top 10 offense last season. And 10 starters are back, including Jalen Daniels, who I think has a case as the best quarterback in the conference. You can make that case.
It's not difficult, yeah.
Devin Neal is back after a 1,000-yard season, and there are reinforcements behind him at running back. Mm-hmm. All the top targets are back this year. We talked a lot about how TCU created big plays last season. That was exactly the deal for Kansas last season, on the ground and through the air. I'm confident that they're going to bomb teams with this offense, especially in a league where defense is in such short supply. So as far as that goes, they're going to be fun as hell to watch. Mm-hmm. The caveat, though, is the defense. If you're talking in terms of holistically, can they hit their over-under of 6, we got to talk about the defense. The entire back 7 is back. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Question? Yeah.
It's a good, the big question mark there, right? Mm-hmm. Kobe Bryant is back. Cobee Bryant.
Okay.
Is back, one of the best defensive backs in the conference.
The Cincinnati Kobe Bryant, was he Coby?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I'm verifying.
I believe so.
Very important work here.
But Kansas has basically outsourced its defensive line this year to private contractors.
Great.
And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know if they can piece it together in time, but they're bringing in guys from the Mountain West and cast-offs from the SEC. And I have faith that Lance Leipold will make them better. I just don't want to get too far out over my skis here. Better.
I like your allusion that Kansas brought in Deloitte to figure out the
Well, they kind of did.
Line.
They just went out and brought guys in. They're Airbnb-ing this thing.
Okay.
And better in this case could still be very bad. Mm-hmm. But I have a lot of faith in Lance Leipold. I have a lot of faith in him that I think the offense will still be very, very good. I don't know about the defense. It's wait and see. That uncertainty to me means a hell of a TV show.
Sure.
So I can't be objective about this team. I'll throw this out there. My take is I can't be objective because I want them to do well. I really like Lance Leipold. And so I'm actually going to bite on the over. In my entry for grand total, I'm going to bite on the over 6.
Well, look, if we're talking about combination head coach and quarterback, it's a good place to start, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of the coaches that are back with promising quarterbacks, like the combination of Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers, was not as good as Lance Leipold and Jalen Daniels last year. So it's a really nice place to start at if you're Kansas. And even though there are expectations, it's still you go to a bowl game right now, consecutive years.
Yeah.
It's pretty unbelievable. It's a long ways away from ESPN lingering on a shot of somebody knitting in the upper rows in Lawrence. So great.
I know. I think we're up to like 24 or 25. We'll say 25.
That's great.
Let's close things out with Oklahoma State.
Okay.
So Oklahoma State 7-5 last year. They lost the lost their bowl game to Wisconsin. Their over/under this year is 6.5. There is some important context that I want to set the groundwork for a moment, if I can, because we have been talking about this Oklahoma State narrative for the entire offseason, really like a season and a half now at this point, where it just feels like things are coming off the swivel a little bit. I wanted to explain why I feel that way.
Okay.
I feel that way because, in a nutshell, what has happened is since Jim Knowles, my guy Jim Knowles, I love him.
Of course. Since
he left, the defense has kind of bottomed out. And that wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world in the Big 12 or for Oklahoma State, if not for the fact that the bedrock of the whole Mike Gundy project, his ethos is offense. And offense has gotten away from him over the last couple seasons. Really, it has not been the same since Mike Yurcich left. So, with that being said, that the recruiting effort, I think, has been underwhelming. There have been a lot of guys transferring out.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from on Oklahoma State. Does any of that sound amiss to you? Am I being too heavy-handed?
No.
In that assessment?
All that sounds right, that there will be moments of excellence that are getting farther and farther away in the rearview mirror. Even 2 years ago with your guy Jim Knowles. Yeah. Like, that seemed to be erased pretty quickly last year with Derek Mason. And so that's the disappointing thing with Oklahoma State, that not only do things change, but they change really quickly.
And look, to the point on the defense dropped 53 spots in the SP+. Mm-hmm. They gave up a ton of big plays, so many on the ground. It was kind of embarrassing. Offensively, they didn't have any complimentary ground game, so a lot of it was on. They had a good running back too, but they put way too much on Spencer Sanders or whoever was playing quarterback in the moment, and just a lot that felt amiss. So what happens in the offseason? What happens in the offseason is my first point of intrigue. You know the name Brian Nardo?
I don't know if I do.
Brian Nardo mean anything to you? Nardo?
No.
Mike Gundy is again doing the thing where he tries to harvest a small a small school assistant from rural Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Mike Yurcich worked when he pulled him from Shippensburg.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Nardo is the next now because Derek Mason retires. He needs a new defensive coordinator. Mike Gundy goes to Gannon College.
Talk to me about Gannon College, Ty.
Erie, Pennsylvania. Enrollment of 4,600.
Okay.
I looked it up. Brian Nardo runs a 3.35. It's been compared a little bit to what they do at Iowa State. He's been very successful, albeit at a much, much different level of college football. I think Gundy likes that he's young and innovative. Let's be real. He's going to need to be extremely innovative because it was bad defense last year and all the good guys left. Everybody's gone. Not totally bare, right? They've got Kendall Daniels, who's a safety freshman of the year in the conference last year. It's not horrible.
Right.
But year one, Brian Nardo bolting this thing together, new scheme with transfers from other small schools and JUCOs. And I don't think that's enough to contain what's coming at him in the Big 12. I admire the hustle here. I admire the out-of-the-box nature of the hire. Shout out Erie. Shout out Gannon.
You like going to Erie? You spent a lot of time in Erie, PA? Okay.
No. But I don't know. This to me is it reeks a little bit of innovative for the sake of innovative, or
they
off
need
the
somebody
grid for the sake of off the grid.
Somebody's got to coach this defense, right?
I know. I don't hate. Look, I don't hate it. It's just, it's a big step up. It's a big step up, especially when you're bolting it together with transfers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
The second most fascinating thing to me is the return of British comedy legend Alan Bowman, baby.
Oh, of course.
He's back. You're going to need a sound for this guy. I don't think he's got eligibility beyond this year. You're going to need a sound for this.
Okay.
Think on that a little bit.
I will.
It's year 6. Bear in mind, this guy came in with the class of 2018. He's bounced around, dealt with injuries. He was at Texas Tech for a couple years, went to Michigan. Now he is here. Do not expect him to bounce around like Spencer Sanders, Dan. I'm going to say it. Earmuff it if you want to. He's too old for that shit. It's just not his game. It's not what he does. He's a pocket guy. I don't know what to make of the receiver room. There's a lot of transfers there. It reminds me a little bit of like 2 years ago when we were waiting for the receivers to develop, and then they did, and it was good. I don't know if this will ever be good. I don't know if Alan Bowman can stay healthy.
Also, some of the receivers have left Oklahoma State.
Yeah, they've left. Oh, yeah. No. There's a mass exodus here.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of the receiver room. The backfield could be interesting. Ollie Gordon, Jaden Nixon is really quick. Yeah. Elijah Collins, remember him from Michigan State? He transferred down. The line in front of them all should be okay, and the schedule's really good. So there's sort of like a push-pull going on there inside my head, whether or not I'm into Oklahoma State.
It just doesn't have the trappings of a team that is righting the ship, right? That there's so much new in so many places where it all feels haphazard and thrown together.
Here's the thing. Who's their guy?
I mean, Gundy?
Who's their gravitational guy on the team?
I don't know. You're in charge of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I'm asking because I don't know. I mean, I like Kendall Daniels.
Yeah.
At safety. I mean, freshman of the year
it's
in the
star
conference
power, yeah.
For a reason, but star power. And problem, I think is you like to refer to it.
I do.
That's my issue. My issue, in a broader sense with Oklahoma State, beyond kind of the star power, is you can't talk confidently about the Pokes this year or beyond, frankly, without a major qualifier, without qualifying everything with if Alan Bowman stays healthy, or if the receiver room develops and there's a star there, if Brian Nardo, the guy from Erie, can cobble together a defense with a bunch of recruits.
Right.
Mike Gundy has been such an interesting character in this football story now for a long time. And I know he's not for everybody. We've got him in our intro for good reasons. Got one of the greatest quotes of all time. Mm-hmm. But even if everything pops and Oklahoma State hits the over and goes for 8 or 9 wins this year, which is not off the table, even if all that happens, I don't know if the infrastructure is there to sustain it beyond this year. We're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this thing where we jump from flame to flame every year and trying to plug the gaps with transfers. And I don't know if I have faith that they can do it.
I don't.
I'm out.
Okay, same.
I'm out.
So how many is that? How many dings? 26? 7?
27.
I love that.
The 27 most fascinating things about the Big 12, Dan. Do you have a prediction? Should we make that 28 and 29 for both of us?
Sure. So in the conference championship game?
Yeah, what's your prediction? Championship game and then conference champion.
Texas over Oklahoma in a rematch like we had in 2018. And I will absolutely be wrong. But in the rare chance, in the very small, minuscule chance that I'm right, I will replay this clip.
I've got Texas over Oklahoma as well.
Wow. Yeah. Definitely not going to happen now.
We jinxed the whole damn thing.
Yeah, it's great.
I think it's a 2-horse race, though. I do.
We say these things every year, and every year we are incorrect.
The 29 most fascinating things about the 2023 Big 12. Go back and listen. Tell your friends to come on over to solidverbal.com to hit subscribe or follow when they get to our podcast. We'd love to have them.
Yeah.
We're trying to grow the 10 as much as possible. Play in our game grand total. Again, go to verballers.com, sign up for any Patreon tier. You'll see the link as soon as you sign up. Grand total. Pick the over-unders for every Power 5 team. Daniel, did I get it right?
You did. You nailed it.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thank you so much for downloading, for listening, for supporting us here in the preseason. We'll be back next week with 2 more conferences. Stay tuned and stay solid.
Happy kolaches to all. Peace.